Hi, Hannah.
Hi, Sam.
What's going on?
Oh, so much.
Yeah?
Yeah. There's lasagna in the oven. There's a cat walking up to us.
Meowing.
And we just got back from Houston, Texas.
More specifically, Katy, Texas.
Katy, Texas. Where we were at the USA Paraclimbing National Championships.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of feelings.
Yes.
Including joy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is the Paraclimbing National Championships?
So USA Climbing has lots of different rock climbing programs and competitions. They have competitions for pro rock climbers who are not disabled.
Mm-hmm.
They have competitions for youth. They have collegiate competitions, and they have paraclimbing competitions. And this was the national paraclimbing competition that feeds into, I believe, 3 World Cups that happen later in the year. It was very big this year because in 2028, we're going to have rock climbing as a Paralympic sport for the very first time.
Oh.
Yeah, so folks came out of retirement, people started turning out, like people are like excited to try to qualify for the Paralympics.
Yeah.
And we went together and I competed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How was the experience?
Intense.
Intense. I don't think it can be captured in one emotion, can it?
No, it was high highs and low lows.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also just like novel feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a non-disabled climber, I went obviously to support you. Mm-hmm. And I also was very interested in getting to watch a national climbing competition. But I did not expect to learn so much about not just the paraclimbing community, but also just climbing in and of itself. I feel like I took away a lot of things that I can do to be a better climber.
Me too. Yeah. I feel like I fretted in the weeks leading up to this trip that if I didn't, let me back up and say some basics. So it used to be that you would climb many routes in the qualifying round and rack up points on your 3 highest scoring routes. Now you are assigned only 2 routes and you only get 1 attempt per route. And that's not something that I knew until I was already like way registered. So I became worried that I wouldn't make it very far up either of the routes that I was assigned. And in fact, that I might fall right off of one immediately, especially if it was overhung. Overhung rock climbing routes are at an acute angle with the floor. The wall is at an acute angle with the floor. So it takes more upper body strength to climb them and a different technique, really. And not one that I've really practiced much. So I was worried that I would fall right off of my routes and not have very many options for routes and that the whole thing would be a waste of time and money. I needn't have worried about that because even if we had just gone to spectate, it would have been worth the trip.
Yeah, it was a great time. So we both climb with the Paracliffhangers, which is a paraclimbing organization. And they sent 55 competitors across New York, California, Texas, Missouri, North Dakota.
I feel like we had a Chicago person in there.
Yeah.
I also climb with Adaptive Climbing Group. I climb with each of those organizations 1 per week. And Adaptive Climbing Group brought a team of 25, also from all over the country. And then, there was one other big organization represented there. Catalyst. They had blue shirts. Mm-hmm. And
ours are purple.
And then some people who just, go to compete as individuals. And for me, it was really exciting to talk to other climbers whose disability affect an upper limb.
Yeah. I was really amazed, and I guess this kind of makes sense, but I was just amazed how well everyone knew each other in the community.
Oh yeah, it's a small community.
It's a small community, but also a lot of people in the community are climbing together multiple times a year between nationals, local competitions.
And the World Cup.
The World Cup.
Which happens 3 times in 3 different countries.
Yes, and Adaptive Climbing Fest in October.
I'm so excited for that.
Yeah. So it's really cool that the community is really tight-knit. And
people
everyone
are really eager to welcome you in and show you the ropes.
And, everyone's there. No one's, I would hope this wouldn't happen in most sports, but, no one's cheering against anyone.
Oh gosh, no.
Everyone, regardless of whether you're with PCH or ACG, everyone's really there wanting to see the best out of everyone.
Yeah. So the schedule of the weekend when you go to nationals is on the first day. If you have not competed before, you go to a classification appointment where you are classified into one of several groups based on the type of physical disability that you have and the severity of it, so that you're competing with other people who are similarly disabled. And those groups are AL, which is amputation lower. So there's AL1 and AL2, depending on how much leg you've got going on. AU, which is amputation upper, and there is AU2 and AU3. There is no AU1 anymore. It was taken away. AU2 is more impaired. AU3 is less impaired. So if you're AU3, you're missing part of your hand. And if you're in AU2, you're missing an arm from somewhere below the elbow.
And yeah, the lower the number, the higher the impairment typically.
Yes. Always. Yeah. There's B and VI, which are the categories for blind and visually impaired people. And then there's RP, which is range and power. So that's where your disability affects your range of motion or the power of your muscles, or both. And then there's youth, which is just any physically disabled youth who want to rock climb. And open, which is like a non-classifiable or undiagnosed disability. And I went in hoping and expecting to be placed in a RP, range and power category, because I have all my limbs and all the components of them, but my left arm, shoulder, elbow, wrist, fingers, etc. are partially paralyzed from a birth injury. So I can't reach very far up above my head. My elbow does not straighten. My wrist actually has no radial range of motion whatsoever. My thumb is essentially not opposable, and my strength is affected. So I thought that would naturally put me in RP, and I was hoping for RP1 because it seemed that RP1 would be the category for someone who is disabled in the way that I am and also has the amount of experience that I have, which is to say not much, would have the most fun on those routes. They would be the most appropriate for me.
Well, I was just going to add, and Tiffany, you, who has the same condition that you have, is in RP1.
Yes, but it affects her very differently not very differently, but it affects her differently from how it affects me. Right. She has a lot less use of that arm. Yeah. Which we can get into.
Yeah, and in the classification meeting, when you first go, you are being evaluated by physical therapists.
Yes.
Who are trying to objectively place you into one of these categories, and therefore they're giving you point values based on their assessment of your range of motion, your
muscle
power. And so, as one can imagine, this leads to some hairy, trying to put a totally objective system on top of a wide, diverse range of disabilities. It is always going to mess up somewhere.
Yeah. And I think I took a positive view of it beforehand. You'll remember our conversation about trans women in sports. I talked about that this process is responsive to the participants and it's nuanced and it's evolving. And I think that all of that is still fairly true. However, it did strike me, particularly as a gender studies and sociology person, the veneer of objectivity, the aesthetic of objectivity, seemed to me, I don't want to say disingenuous, a fiction that we're all kind of playing into for the sake of this is what we need to do in order to have this system, which we do need, right?
Otherwise, you would almost have just a different category for every person.
Exactly. And then it wouldn't be a competition at all. But I was assessed in a way that I have not been assessed since I was a kid, really. Testing my active and passive range of motion. So like manipulating my body physically, not in any kind of intrusive or painful way. In fact, before they even started the examination, they, asked me about consent and touching and stuff. But, testing how my shoulder rotation, how much I'm able to straighten my elbow, my wrist, my fingers, and then testing muscle power in all of those ways. So like pushing against the physical therapist and, scoring the strength and range of motion. Range of motion is, I feel like, a little bit more objective than strength because you're literally just measuring an angle. But when it comes to strength, you're pushing against a physical therapist's hand, right? And then they're giving you a score for how strong you are. So the athlete who came in with me as my advocate for this appointment pointed out that like these assessments can sometimes vary wildly depending on the day and depending on the PT who's conducting them. Anyway, all of that is to say that I was given a score of 28 points of impairment and I needed 30 to get into RP1. And it was very disappointing. I remember like finding it surreal to walk into a room with the intention of presenting myself as maximally impaired. Impaired isn't even, I talked about this also with Emily, was the person who came in with me for the room. Like the word impaired and the concept of impairment is something that is like so unfriendly to us as disabled people, particularly like disabled people with, an inclination toward advocacy and disability justice, that we would think more in terms of differences and adaptations and not in terms of impairment. And I know, especially for me as a kid, like my hope going into doctor's appointments and interacting with, grown-ups, which is, I think, another difference between going into PT as an adult, as a disabled adult versus a disabled child, is that that power differential is less present. But I wanted to project myself as close to non-disabled as I could and as close to unimpaired as I could.
As a kid.
Mm-hmm. Because I understood disabled to be a bad thing, and I wanted to think of myself as typical and normal and like, someone who belongs in the community, who belongs among the other normal, typical kids, which I understood to mean not being disabled. That disabled was other and inferior and apart and separate. Often literally, right? Like I have memories of, I missed my class school trip to Old Sturbridge Village because I had to go to a pre-op appointment. Or, being asked by my friends at Girls Inc., or not asked, but assigned to shower in the handicap stall. Not because I had access needs, but because, they just saw signage that said this stall is for disabled people. And they said, oh, that's a disabled people, get in. It wasn't bullying. It was just kids.
This was your fellow, like your peers, or these were adults?
Oh, no, these were my peers. These were children.
Okay.
Children, like, processing these concepts that, like, we understood as roles and categories and not in terms of access
clear
needs.
Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and clear boundaries.
Yeah.
So, yeah, walking into that appointment, trying to make the case that I am more impaired.
Walking into the appointment for your classification for nationals.
Yes. With the intention of trying to make the case that I am more impaired was surreal to me. So I was assigned to AU2. So it was me and a bunch of amputees. And they said to me in the room, we know this is unfortunate for a first-time competitor who has less than a year of climbing experience, because that's a category that the routes are quite advanced and quite challenging. And I felt disappointed. I felt like it meant that I was not going to be as competitive this year as I maybe could have been. And definitely it felt like I would have less fun climbing the routes, which was what I was really concerned about. And that was my classification experience.
Yeah.
And the next day was qualifiers.
So basically, for every category that we previously discussed, they're assigned 2 routes.
And there's overlap, right? So I think there was a total of 6 routes.
Yeah.
And like multiple categories were assigned to the same route.
Yeah. You're going to go up, you're going to climb your first route. You get 1 shot as soon as you fall off. You get 1 point for each hold that you successfully
like bore weight on. And the idea is that the routes are supposed to start out easier and get harder as you ascend.
Correct. And then if you touch a hold but don't solidly land it, you just get a plus point.
Which is like a half a point.
So as a climber myself, going, hearing as you did probably maybe 2 weeks before the event that you'd only get 1 chance on each route. I myself was like, holy cow, like I can't imagine going into a competition and only getting 1 shot. I mean, there's so many variables that can throw you off a route.
Yup.
So like you better be on your
A. Competition before and I got 3 attempts per route and that was like very much what I was expecting.
Right. So it really comes down to how well can you read the route, which is basically just you can see the route and then you want to try to determine what the best way up is, as they call it, the beta.
The things that your body does to get you up.
Right.
Yeah.
And they didn't send out the route information until the morning of the event. So you basically at breakfast, we were all sitting and looking at
videos of a non-disabled person climbing the route. It was videos of the route setters climbing the route.
Right.
There were some funny moments in some of the videos where like you could see that there was a cut and re-record and the people watching it were like, oh, even the route setter fell off of it.
Yeah. And these routes are probably 60 feet.
Yeah. I don't know. What was as a climber yourself, like what was your feeling about the routes? Did they look fun? Did they look difficult?
They looked like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Basically they set 6 routes for this competition. You can watch a lot of people just climb these 6 routes. At the end of the day, I've seen a dozen people climb this route. I want to get up there and try it because I want to see like, oh, wow, I wonder if I can make that work. And, this is a national competition. So there, as you said, as opposed to what would normally be set in a gym where you have 1 grade of a route to start out and it stays that same difficulty or grade all the way up. These routes were set to supposedly start out easiest at the bottom and then gradually or, just get harder as you got higher up the wall.
That's the theory. But it's hard. And I understand now why the people I was asking about this had trouble explaining it to me because the routes are set so differently from what we're used to in a gym, not just in terms of like starting easier and becoming progressively harder, but just like the types of holds and the sequences of them. They look different. They feel different.
Route setting is so much an art. It's such an art.
It is. Yeah. Somebody said to me, the difficulty of routes in a gym, when they're designed to be more difficult, it's as if they're just trying to throw you off. They're going to give you a couple of tiny crimps and hope that your finger strength can't handle it. And with these routes, it is not so. Most of the holds are like big, and then a lot of them are weird. And they're arranged in a sequence that like there could be multiple ways to get up them. And it's definitely nothing like climbing a ladder, but you just have to be really strong.
Right. You have to have some technique.
Yeah, and so the way that they do that is there's volumes, which is like the wall basically coming off the wall in weird shapes, and then holds that you can't really get a good grip on them unless you're coming at them from the side or underneath.
Yeah, a lot of traverses. You get halfway up, and now the next hold is to your right or to your left. You're not just climbing straight up anymore. You've got to get across, which requires precise foot placement. You've got small footholds. It's a lot of balance, especially on the less overhung routes, the more slab type routes.
So I looked at the 2 that I was given, and one had a really tricky start that the climber in the video and most of the climbers who I watched got through the start by reaching up high with their left hand, which obviously I was not going to be able to do. My affected arm is my left arm. So we came up with a lot of different ideas for how I could get past that start, because the whole next section of it looked very Hannah friendly. Like, it was on slab. There were lots of holds. They were like, you know, big and chunky with chips on them, which is always fun for me. And, you know, I figured if I could get past that start, then I could get past a good long section before the next tricky part that would probably throw me off. But it was a big if whether I could get past that start. And basically I couldn't get past the start. It would have been a really tricky start for anybody who is affected on their left side. But a big part of why I couldn't get past the start was because my feet were on a volume with very small, very slippery footholds that I hadn't sufficiently practiced on. And I kept on having to readjust while my right arm was holding up a lot of my body weight, holding on to such a crimpy handhold. It was really, you said, like, it was for feet. It wasn't really for hands. My body was shaking. I was taking a lot of deep breaths, and I just wanted to keep on trying as many things as I could try before I fell off. So I had to readjust my feet. I reached for the left-handed hold that I frankly knew I was not going to be able to reach. And then I tried to get my body onto the other side of the first big elephant trunk that I had grabbed from the ground, sort of tucking my waist onto the other side of it so that I could lean against it, which kind of worked. And then I think my fatal flaw here was that I ignored what my foot was doing while I was so focused on getting onto the other side of that elephant trunk and trying to reach up with my right hand. And that's what eventually threw me off. And so my very worst fear had come true. I had dawdled around at the very bottom of a route and not made it even past the start before I'd fallen off. And it was so sad.
Yeah.
And I was so humiliated. I was so embarrassed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I think what really was impressed upon the people watching was your tenacity. Number one, you held on for a minute down at the bottom. Honestly, you might have been on the route at the same
amount of time
that some of the other competitors were climbing. It's just they got higher. Yeah, so you clearly had the strength to hold yourself up on the wall, and you also weren't letting each different obstacle that you ran into just completely dissuade you from continuing to climb. I think pretty clearly, as you kind of just mentioned, tried at least 3 different methods of attack. None of them worked out.
Because I'm just simply not that experienced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been climbing for 8 months.
Yes.
And meanwhile, maybe the next closest person to you has been climbing for like 2 years.
2 years, 1.5 years.
And like, there's people that have been in your category that you directly competed against that have been climbing for like 10 or 15 years, right?
Yes.
This was a very difficult route. And I think
it didn't start out easier and get harder. It started out hard and then got easier and then got harder. Yeah, it was advice from Megan Gleason, who finished second in RP2 this year and who I met in Boston. We were looking at the route beforehand, and she said, I think the most important thing for you on this is to remember that you're on slab. Slab is when the wall is at an obtuse angle with the floor, right? So gravity's working in your favor. So on slab routes, technical precision, footwork, and balance tend to be the name of the game more so than upper body strength. So she said, remember that you're on slab and that gravity is not your enemy. Take a lot of deep breaths, try to calm your body down, and just try lots of different things. That was the advice that she gave me that stuck with me the most. The idea to get my body onto the other side of the elephant trunk was mine, actually. Mm-hmm. And
it worked.
It worked, and some people were skeptical of it. I was like, no, I think that's going to be the only thing that would work on this for me.
I'll be honest, I didn't think it was going to be possible. And that...
because it was a skinny little place I was trying to, like, wedge my body into.
Yeah, and that goes into, like, a thing that we've talked about this past week about how it's so... like, when you're reading routes, if you only look at a route from one angle, like let's say directly in front of it, there's so much about it that you can miss. It's really important that if you're reading a route to see it from as many different angles as you can, get up close, see what the actual pitch of it is, the angle that it's at.
So at this point in the story, my 2 worst case scenarios have come true. I have been classified in AU instead of RP, and I have fallen off a route at the very start. And I came off the route, went to you, you hugged me and said, I'm so proud of you. And I thought, I'm not proud of myself. Don't say that. But then you and, some other climbers pointed out the things that I had done well that were visible to you. And then we had a little bit of time before my second route. But yeah, I don't know. I guess what I'm like curious about is like, because I don't quite know how I did this, because it's not something that I consider myself skilled in. Like, I was able to come back from feeling so ashamed and disappointed to kind of pulling myself together to take on that second route. Like, what did it look like the steps to that were from the outside?
I mean, I think the first part of it was kind of letting yourself feel the emotions that you felt and not trying to deny that you were upset about it, but just be upset about that first route. And then I think that allowed you to process through what had just happened, but then also be like, okay, but I'm still in the game. I've still got one more route I've got to climb. I know this route is more accessible in the beginning, and I know I want to get to this point on the route.
Yeah, here's what's next. And then also like sharing with a lot of people.
Yeah.
What had just happened, because when I have a shame response to something that I'm going through, my inclination is to push through the shame and confide in other people, because as soon as you say it out loud, it's so much less shameful because people meet you with compassion.
Yeah.
In my very privileged life, that is. And also like hearing my friends tell me about times that they didn't make it past the start of a route and times that they made like very few or no points at nationals, it made me feel like it's not foolish or ridiculous for me to be here. And then like you say, like, we went over to that second route and really analyzed it and came up with my beta, and I got to get onto it, and I climb 2 or 3 times a week, and I love it so much. It makes me so happy. I look forward to it all day when I get to go climb, because the inner child, the inner monkey just like comes out. You're in this colorful place. You're defying gravity. You're contorting your body into these weird shapes. You're in puzzle solving mode. You're a little bit scared because you're experiencing heights. You feel strong. You feel creative. It's just... It just makes me so happy. I just love it so much. And like, I started climbing that second route and I was just having a blast climbing. Like, I was just actually climbing, and climbing to the best of my ability, which is far lower than the ability of the other women in my category who have years of experience on me. But to be able to actually like represent the skill that I have developed, which is leaps and bounds beyond what I was capable of when I first started in that setting, on such a like fun and wacky route, and in front of so many people who I look up to so much, who were cheering me on. The joy was unbelievable. It was like all of the normal joy of climbing plus the joy of this route is ridiculous, and plus the joy of, I'm showing what I can do to all these people who I admire so much, and they are meeting me with boundless, enthusiastic support. And I think like coming from musical theater, there's always this big gulf between what I sound like when I'm singing at home in my apartment or in a voice lesson versus on stage or at an audition. And so what was so thrilling about this was that I knew I was climbing as well or a little bit better than how I climb on a normal Wednesday night or Sunday afternoon. I unlocked something better. And I don't know how many times I've experienced that before, but it was thrilling.
I think the most thrilling, like heart racing part of it was when you lost your foot, I think, at one point.
I barn doored out and I caught myself.
Yeah. But as you said, had this been the Hannah from 8 months ago, you would have fallen off.
That's true. Yeah.
Because you wouldn't have had it wouldn't have just been a matter of strength, but a matter of experience and skill and technique and knowing how to kind of catch yourself and get back on. But there was definitely a little bit of tenacity there too. Like, nope, this is not where I'm stopping.
Not letting that happen again.
And then you ended up climbing even higher than you thought you were going to get on that route.
A little bit past where I thought. But the point is it's not like I was really standing out from the crowd in terms of how far up I made it on that route. But like everybody else in my category was just like completely psyched with me. And I think a lot about like, I've done races in New York with NYC Runs, and their tagline is win your race. It's not like win the race, it's win your race. And I think that model of sportsmanship of like, this is about what you personally are trying to achieve. It's not about distinguishing yourself or exceeding others, that I find really appealing. And being able to, like, I help you exceed what you thought that you could do, and you help me exceed what I thought that I could do by trying to beat each other. Does that make sense? Yeah. That is like a really cool aspect of sportsmanship that I don't think that I understood until I was an adult. That you probably understood much earlier on than I did.
Yeah, I mean, I had the opportunities to,
Yeah. And yeah, just like ecstatic joy. Yeah, top 10 moments in, I don't know, maybe the past 5 years of my life. Like,
wow.
Which is so funny because it's like, yeah, like I got an okay score.
Oh, yeah, and I think that just speaks to how cool it was to get to experience this.
Yes.
And how cool it was that everyone is so welcoming.
Yes.
Like, you were competing with people that you knew you weren't going to win against. They had way more experience than you did. And yet
they celebrated with me as hard as they celebrated with each other when they were topping the routes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember a couple of months ago was when I topped my first 5.9, and I was struggling mightily. And most people would regard a 5.9 as like still kind of a beginner route. And I was next to this woman who was on, I don't know if it was a 5.11 or a 5.12, but it was like pretty freaking advanced. And I remember she had like glitter on her face, and we were coordinating with each other, to not get in each other's way. And then she sat and waited and cheered me on while I got over the overhang section. And I got to celebrate after topping my first 5.9 with this woman who was climbing like a high 5.11. And again, like, she was just completely stoked. I don't even know her name, but she was like so happy to share that experience with me. It's such beautiful camaraderie that I didn't know to expect when I first started climbing.
Yeah.
I'm remembering that earlier in this conversation, we alluded to like classifications and the differences between someone like me and someone like Tiffany. But yeah, regarding my classification in AU2, so my first thought being in that category was, will they resent me for being in this category because I have all my fingers? And that seems like an unfair advantage. And then watching them all climb, I realized like they have so much more overhead reach and shoulder stability and shoulder strength than I do. That's not fair. I'm jealous. Yeah. And then if you were to put me in RP1, I would be competing against, I was going to say someone like, but actually literally I would be competing against Tiffany Yu, who is a climber and also a writer. She recently came, actually, I don't know how recent it was, but her last book was The Anti-Ableist Manifesto. Yes, Anti-Ableist Manifesto, Tiffany Yu. Look it up. She has brachial plexus injury, Erb's palsy, same thing as me, so paralysis affecting the arm, but she has much less use of her left arm, to the degree that like the majority of the time that she's climbing with 3 points of contact, 2 feet and an arm. And she does something that I occasionally do, but so much more rarely than her, which is just like kind of launch her body up and grab. Rarely she will like wedge her left arm or hand into something and use that. So it would be either like put me in AU2, which is kind of unfair to me, or put me in RP1, which is kind of unfair to everyone else. So it's like, do you want to be unfair to the one individual person, or do you want to be unfair to the entire category? But it's going to be unfair. And like just swallowing that, sitting in that imperfection, acknowledging it, and deciding to just rock with it, just keep climbing anyway, you know? Again, like, sport lessons are always life lessons, right? Not that I would have beaten the AU2 women or the RP1 women this year anyway. I was coming in with less than a year of experience. But, it's an insight about the imperfection of the system and the inevitable imperfection of the system.
Yeah.
And the veneer of objectivity that kind of papers over that. Yeah, that was qualifiers, and it was a great day. And we had a whole other day left ahead of us where we got to watch the finals. And the way that finals works is if you are in the top 4 or 5 of a category, you are put in what it sounds like USA Climbing wants to now refer to not as isolation, but as the warm-up area. You must surrender your phone. You're hanging out with the other athletes. You have access to like normal gym routes to climb on and exercise equipment. You get 5 minutes to look at the routes beforehand. You're not allowed to consult with anybody unless you are blind, in which case you obviously can consult with your caller, because otherwise... Yeah, and at first I thought that like the role of the caller was only just to describe the holds and their locations, but no, as a caller you're very much giving beta the entire time. And in fact, it is sometimes easier to describe beta than than hold. So we got to sit and we watched finals. Some of the most amazing climbing I've ever seen in person. I'm so glad that we stuck it out, because the AU2 women came, I think they were the last category. Watching them climb, the next day when my nervous system was calm and just being in observation mode, and seeing how much sense it really makes to put me in this category because of the techniques that I have already started to lean on, like knee drops and pistol squats. Not that I'm actually doing real pistol squats, right? But like high legs, fancy footwork, laybacks, and, using the elbow, the shoulder, wedging your body into and up against different like crevices and volumes. All of this stuff, the style that I have slowly been developing is the style that these women climb with. And seeing like how advanced you can get with those techniques was really motivating. And then also like observing them and learning what I need to focus on training now was incredibly edifying. I'm so stoked to get back to the gym and start training my pistol squats and start training my footwork and start training my endurance and spending more time on overhang and working on my hip flexibility. It's so much more clear to me now what it takes to be a strong AU2 climber, because I watched the best in the country, a few feet in front of me.
Yeah.
And then talk to them about it.
Yeah.
What a gift. What a blessing.
You want to finish up on like the men's/open category?
Oh, I was so stupid. Yeah. So qualifiers, my friend Carissa said, would you like a trans flag to put on your harness to speak out against fascism? And I said, absolutely. And I put it on to my harness, not knowing that it was about the event that we were at. Or not like fully making a connection. I was being self-involved. I was thinking about, I wasn't putting 2 and 2 together. I was thinking about being at qualifiers and someone offered me a trans flag and I said, yes, I like trans. And put it onto myself and didn't ask any follow-up questions. Our other friend Mads had signed up initially planning on being part of the non-binary category. And the non-binary category was apparently discontinued. And so Mads did make finals, and we had to go to find the commentators and make sure that they knew that Mads's pronouns are they, them. And anyway, after the fact, we found out that what happened was that USA Climbing, not in any response to any kind of like federal regulations or like outside pressure, except for like the implicit pressure of like where the political winds are blowing, I guess, absorbed the non-binary category into the men's category for several of the disability categories, including men's AL, so amputation lower, was men's/open.
Was it not for every category?
Oh, was it for every category?
I think so, because I was trying to figure out what
was it every men's category?
I think it was every men's category. I was trying to figure out what M/O meant, and then when I was comparing it to the W, I was like, oh, that must be men/open category.
But that seems intentionally confusing because
Right.
open refers to open disability category
Right.
already.
There's
in this
already an
world.
open
There's already
category.
an open, and it's a disability category, not a gender category.
Right.
So we didn't understand. And it turns out that, yeah, if you are non-binary, you're welcome to compete in the men's category, or if you are non-binary and assigned female at birth, you're welcome to compete in the women's category. And so for my first reaction to this is you can't even say men/non-binary. You have to say men/open. That seems wimpy as hell. Because it makes it subtle, right? Like I didn't notice because I was at the event and I just saw O and I was like, oh, for open. That's weird. I thought that was a disability category, la la la, and ignored it, which is, I feel like, the intended outcome. And then to subsume non-binary climbers or to, you know, absorb non-binary climbers only into the men's category plays into this idea that men are more advantaged because they're bigger and stronger. And so trans people as like inherently suspect and, you know, cunning and predatory, then we must be worried about them. We should put them with the men so that they're competing against the people who they would not have an advantage against. I don't think that logic points to a positive attitude either toward trans people or toward women.
Yeah, like why wasn't the women's category women/open if non-binary people assigned female at birth could compete in the women's category?
Yeah, but also, like, why not just keep the non-binary category?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to hear the reasoning.
Yeah. Well,
it makes there isn't.
There's the official reasoning, and then there's the real reasoning. And
right. I would love to hear the
probably
official reasoning because I don't think that it makes any sense. It's, you know, it's like arguing that we need to have one standard for sex segregation in sports across all sports for the sake of fairness, as if fairness looks the same in all these different sports, right? Yeah. I wonder if the official reasoning was simply that they claimed that they weren't getting enough non-binary people.
Yeah.
I doubt it, right? Because it's rock climbing.
Yeah.
Everyone's non-binary.
Yeah. It was interesting when we were at the...
Oh, yeah. We went on an indoor skydiving outing the day after finals. And it was very funny because we had been, you know, competing for 2 days. And then after the second day went out and there was an after party, obviously. And so we weren't all fresh as daisies the next morning. And we went on this outing for indoor skydiving that Paracliffhangers very generously set up for us. But I think everybody was like, you know, feeling the fatigue from the weekend. And the indoor skydiving people really wanted us to be like so amped. And we were all just like, we are so sore and hungover. Yeah. we cannot muster more enthusiasm. We've mustered all the enthusiasm that we have. Yeah.
But I could tell that the instructor, like the word able-bodied, the term able-bodied was something he hadn't used before.
Oh, right. And he had to, I guess I'm just putting this together now. It was probably the first time that he had to use it because it was the first time that he was dealing with a group of people where the majority of us were disabled.
Right.
And that the non-disabled people were the exception.
Right.
So he was like, he had to say who here is able-bodied instead of asking who here has a disability.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And which created confusion.
Yes.
Because
I remember Jody came up to me and was like, do you want to be with the able-bodied or disabled group? And I was like, that's a good, I don't know. I don't know what's involved with this.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and I think it just speaks to, we were talking about this morning, about how the term able-bodied is, like, what exactly does that mean? Because, like, does it mean someone without a disability? Or does it just mean someone who's able to do a specific
with their body.
Stuff with their body? In which case, I mean, someone can be, as you pointed out this morning, someone can be both disabled and able-bodied.
So that my story about this was I was part of a like LGBT advocacy youth group when I was in high school, and there we were doing this like identity and social justice workshop, and they gave us this paper and it had a list of identity words on it, and you were supposed to circle the ones that applied to you. And I read the paper as 2 columns. So I went down one column and down the other column. And then after we started the discussion, it became clear to me very quickly that we were actually supposed to read it as rows, and that the identity words that were along the same line on the page were supposed to be mutually exclusive with each other. So there was like white, person of color, cis or trans, man or woman or other gender identity, Christian or subscribing to a different faith or atheist. And two of them that were paired together were disabled and able-bodied. But myself, going down each column, not reading them as connected to each other, just circled both, because I had only heard the phrase able-bodied in the context of like historical job postings for able-bodied young men. So I thought able-bodied meant capable of doing manual labor. And I was like, yeah, I'm capable of doing manual labor. My dad always makes me work in the garden, and I circled it. It was only afterwards that I realized that the idea of having a body that is able was supposed to be mutually exclusive with having a body that is disabled. And the reason why that's so tricky for me is that a body that is able is such a slippery concept, because able to do what? You could do so many things with a body. What do you want to do? What do we consider like valuable and needed? What are the abilities that a body can do that must render it able? Because I know a lot of bodies that can climb an overhung rock wall like a... Oh, wait, can I swear? I know a lot of bodies that can climb an overhung rock wall like a mother and can't walk, right? Most quote unquote able bodies cannot do what a lot of I would say now, most of the able bodies that I know can do.
There were more people this weekend who were better climbers than I was.
Yeah, totally. As there should be, right? It's a national tournament. But it points to me toward the constructedness and the artificial boundaries of these terms. Because to be disabled is somewhat about having some kind of status or condition that inhibits your ability to live a typical life. In some way, it inhibits your ability to take part in typical activities, right? That's like the dictionary definition of disability. But we have not captured the full picture if we don't also understand that disability also means a social role and a stigma. It's a label, it's a box. And those are constructed. If the body abilities that were considered standard and important and good shifted, then the people who fell into that category would also shift. And it's also something that we put on to people based on their appearance and our perception of them. Again, going back to the veneer of objectivity, the aesthetic of objectivity, right? It is so much more slippery than we want to admit. Mm-hmm. And I think the able-bodied disabled confusion that I encountered that day and that we were discussing this morning really points to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the important thing is I love rocks and climbing them.
And we also love talking about gender and sociology.
Yeah.
I am excited for next Paraclimbing Nationals. I mean, heck, I'm excited for just the different paraclimbing events that are coming up throughout the next year. But definitely I'm excited to see what next year's Paraclimbing Nationals will look like and what you'll look like in them.
Yeah. I think I'm going to be a lot better at rock climbing then than I am now. So from our entire weekend, but also from our conversation today, what have you learned that is going to, you're going to channel toward being more loving in society?
I knew going into this weekend that I would be watching climbers who are better than me at climbing, and I'd enjoy watching the climbing. I don't think I thought as much about how I would learn a lot this weekend. And I think that really speaks to the importance of raising not just disabled voices and disabled lives up, but also the voices of minorities and queer people. And you never know what you're going to be able to learn from someone who lives life a little differently than you.
Aww. There's so many things that I'm going to take away from this weekend. But something that I'm going to take away is it is incumbent upon me to let go of contempt and judgment for myself in order to be kinder to the people around me. Because every time that I am impatient or harshly judgmental or not compassionate, not accepting of myself for where I'm at with my skill level, for how I feel about my appearance, for how refined my social skills are, whatever thing I'm bullying myself over. My brain is rehearsing bullying somebody else over that. I think I worked really hard and did a lot of really good work this weekend at like processing through and discarding mean thoughts about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, I will better be able to meet the people around me with compassion, kindness, patience, and excitement for where they're going to grow.
Yeah,
And
sometimes the best way to get out of your own head is to get into the head of others.
yeah, but I guess I'm trying to say, like, when I'm practicing being mean to myself, I'm practicing being mean to others. And when I'm practicing being kind to myself, I'm practicing being kind to others. And I want to be kind to others. And I did a much better job this weekend at being kind to myself than I maybe thought I was capable of through moments that were really difficult and disappointing. And I'm going to be proud of myself right now and say that that was great. And I did a good job.
You did an amazing job.
And so when I see other people who are novices, who are awkward, who don't hold themselves with the level of ease and experience and confidence that I aspire to, and I recognize some of myself in that presentation, if I can keep being kind to them, then I can keep being kind to those parts of myself that also need to be held. And I realize that I'm talking about something that we didn't really talk about in this conversation, but it was a big part of my experience of the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. In terms of acting more loving, I think that's been a big takeaway.
Absolutely.
I love you.
I love you too. Let's go eat some
lasagna
lasagna and watch Top 5.
Yeah.